Peace up, A-Town. Welcome back to the Balance Breakdown. That's right, that's rhyming. Fuck faces. That's right. My name is Harry Powell. Funnily enough, I am not Ian O'Neill. Ian O'Neill is in the Emerald Isle of Ireland, sinking some serious volumes of the good stuff, hanging out with families and doing the damn thing. I am joined by ESK himself, Mr. Spencer Kite. Spencer, how's it going?
Going well. How are you? It's nice to this feels like old times. This is now consecutive weeks. It's a rhythm. It feels good.
Certainly does. I mean, I'm gonna set up the breakdown with a marginally negative view of the card, and you mentioned rhythm. Like, it feels as though we are in a rhythm of UFC cards where we have, the tiering, and we spoke about this on the preview show, and I certainly won't rehash those points, but it feels as though even on the night the card certainly delivered more than I think we expected on paper. But these cards, I think, have foretold us exactly what we are to expect. In my Severe Spotlight this week, I wrote about the fans' desire, right? The base of the fans' desire, at least my interpretation of the base of fans' desire, and that is to be entertained in whatever fashion that looks like. I think my interpretation of entertainment is different from your average fans' version of entertainment, and likely different from yours or Ian's or Shawnee's or Graham's or whoever's version of entertainment. The headliner was Virna Jandiroba versus Amanda Lemos. Virna Jandiroba coming away with a fantastic armbar finish. Steve Garcia had a fine win over. I'm going to butcher this name. 1 second. I'm going to pull up topology.
Sung Woo Choi.
Thank you very much. Kurt Holliber walked away with a unanimous decision over Kainan Krachewski. Bruno Silva, your boy, we'll get to him, had a wonderful, wonderful finish against Cody Durden after what looked to be a very difficult start to round two. Duhu Choi was back, and he finished Bill Algeo in the second round with a left hook finish and some shots. We saw Haider Emil have 65 seconds of madness against Jung Young Lee. Cody Gibson finished Brian Gallagher with a arm triangle. Miranda Maverick beats Diana Barbosa by decision. Trey Ogden beats Loic Radzhabov by decision. Luana Carolina beats Lucy Podolova by decision. And then finally, the curtain jerker, exactly where this type of fight should be. Thomas Peterson beats Mohammed Usman by decision. So I'm going to start by just asking your overall feeling for the card after it's finished. What do we got?
Terrific. Thoroughly entertaining. Started poorly. You and I chatted as you were sort of settling into your evening as the fights were starting. And we said, like, let's communicate as this goes along and we'll figure out what Monday's going to look like. And I said, 2 fights in, 2 decisions, looking like we're not going to have lots to talk about. And from there on, it was pretty good. Trey Ogden, Loic Radzhabov had some moments. And then the rest of the fights held my attention. I was interested in Miranda Maverick as she's coached by a friend, Elliot Marshall. I thought she did well. I wanted to see how she competed. And then the rest of the way, we got, 7 finishes or 6 finishes out of 7 fights. We got some chaos, which is always fun. We got some comebacks. We got some arm bars that got Shawnee saying armbar. I mean, on a night, as you said, on a night where expectations were low, this exceeded expectations. And so the only way I can come away from it is going, oh, that was a better Saturday than I expected. And I'm happy with that.
As we should be. Somebody that's certainly happy is Virna Jandiroba. She goes in against Amanda Lemos and is the tale of two halves, in my opinion, right? Like, she looks so out of water on the feet, in comparison to Amanda Lemos anyway. And when the fight then hits the mat, she just is in her absolute element. Before I get into the nitty-gritties of both the finishing and some of the things that she was doing grappling-wise, I wanted to sort of get, 1, your opinion on the fight as a whole, but 2, your opinion of what this does to her title challenging status after this.
So we'll start with the second part. I think it makes her the #1 contender. And with all due respect to Tatiana Suarez, who is undefeated, who is sort of for years been everybody's, oh, she's going to be strawweight champion. She can't stay healthy. We're coming up on another year of absence from the octagon. The last win is Jessica Andrade, which is an outstanding win, but Jessica Andrade took that fight on short notice. And so when you're Virna Jandiroba and you now have 4 consecutive victories over ranked opponents, and the person you're comparing that against is Tatiana Suarez, who's coming off an injury, who has 1 win over a ranked opponent in the last number of years. And yes, you can make a case about some of the previous wins because, you know, Nina Nunes was number 3 at the time, and Alexa Grasso has grown up to be flyweight champion, and Carla Esparza, former 2-time champion, was in there. Availability is your best ability, and Tatiana Suarez hasn't been available. And in her stead, Virna Jandiroba is going out and beating former title challengers and submitting them and dominating them, for that matter. So I think it makes her the number 1 contender. They talked about it on the broadcast. I talked about it going in and coming out of the fight. She and Suarez are the only 2 people in the top 5 that have yet to challenge Zhang Weili or yet to face Zhang Weili. Tatiana Suarez isn't here. This moment right now, she's not here. And it would be, to me, a mistake to bring her back off the shelf and straight into that fight. And so somewhere later this year, I think we see Virna Jandiroba get a title fight. It makes a lot of sense at this moment. And then on the other side of it, just in terms of the fight itself, I mean, I got to give it up to this woman who is willing to stand there and test herself in a uncomfortable position, fully knowing that when we get to where I want to be, I'm going full spider monkey. Like I'm just, whether you bring it to the ground, whether I bring it to the ground, no matter how we get there, the minute we get into an entanglement, you're fucked. And I'm just going to dominate every piece of this. And she did. And to be able to stay composed through those not so great moments and then dominate the way she does is a piece of her game that I have always liked.
Yeah. So I think the things that were impressive to me is there are a couple of things that are incredibly, incredibly difficult when you're grappling. Not just grappling, but grappling at 1, that level, and 2, at that intensity. And one of the things that just blows me away is the control that Jandiroba has from top, but also the base that she has on top, her spatial awareness. There was a moment when she had taken her head out of the guillotine and she'd forced Amanda Lemos' shoulders to the mat, hips to the mat. And she was in a position called the high tripod. High tripod is where she'd pummeled herself into double underhooks. She was using her head as a crossface, and then she was working on piking her hips up and clearing her knee line. Now, Amanda Lemos made a really, really interesting adjustment, or an interesting choice, I guess, in this moment. And that was to put her feet on the cage and use her feet to almost like barrel roll backwards, right? And really throw Jandiroba off. Now, Jandiroba here notices in that moment what's happening, which doesn't happen, by the way. Like in a regular grappling match, if you're just in the middle of the mat or whatever, that hip bump, that hip thrust, that bridge doesn't exist, because there's nothing to bridge your hips into, because Jandiroba's hips are piked up all the way into the sky, right? It just doesn't exist. So in that moment, Jandiroba makes 2 amazing decisions. The first one is to keep the left side underhook and allow her right-hand side to base outwards as she goes. And the second is that she realizes in the moment that this is going to give Lemos back exposure. And so as she wrestles up to the top, she knows that Lemos is going to attack the back, hikes up her underhook to turn the shoulders of Lemos off, and starts to turn the corner to make sure that she can shock Lemos off the top. Like, that is not something you replicate in a grappling round, right? It is not something you find very often. And so her ability to control the scrambles from top was sublime. And then from the bottom, her consistent off balancing of Lemos was just something to behold, right? Like, it is so difficult when you're in MMA 1, and 2, when you're grappling, as I say, at that intensity and that level, to consistently keep your opponent off balance. There was a moment where Jandiroba hits a takedown and Lemos rides it beautifully and ends up on top. that moment, right? There's a moment there, and you see it. You see the depth of grappling in Jandiroba's game, where so many other fighters, except Bottom, they pick a guard and they work to go, okay, we're going to stop shots coming down. We're going to go feet to hips eventually. We're going to do whatever. Jandiroba goes immediately into a guard called knee twist, where she's collected the ankle of Amanda Lemos and she's hipping into the side of the knee to make it hard for Lemos to pick her knee up and start flattening Jandiroba to mount. Immediately builds up into a dogfight, and then she starts stepping over. A mad scramble happens, and the second most beautiful thing outside of the finish comes now. Lemos goes for a rolling back take. Jandiroba in mid-air pummels what we call crab ride, which is effectively two shins behind your partner's hamstrings. And as they hit the mat, Jandiroba searches for a far trap grip and takes the back. Like, that is unimaginably high level grappling that we get to see, and the finish itself is just absolutely fucking unbelievable. The speed of the switch off from the Kimura grip to an armbar, the ability to break the grip purely with the strength of your leg extension is unreal. Like, breaking grips in MMA is extremely hard, and to then, you see a lot, especially with females, that it is extremely difficult to finish arm bars because of the dexterity of the shoulder, because of the dexterity of the elbow, because of the dexterity of the wrist. And that arm bar came on quick. It looked to me as though Lemos tapped twice or three times. And as the armbar didn't come up and the referee stopped and didn't stop the fight, Amanda Lemos was immediately looking to build height. And I was just blown away, really blown away.
Yeah, so was I. And you can explain that stuff way better than I can. So I'm glad you took that there. But to me, this was, and I hope this is the case. I hope this was a moment that the people watching this fight, and even people that watch it after or just see the result, finally come to appreciate what Virna Jandiroba does. There's a woman that was undefeated before she got to the UFC, Invicta FC champion, won the title, defended the title, has fought nothing but very good competition the whole way through, and has continued building her game and getting a little better, getting to a point where she's comfortable enough in the stand-up that you have to at least respect it a little. You can't just sell out and not worry about anything. And then she's still specialist, and it's specialist on that. And I'm somebody that won't invoke this name very often. It's specialist in that Demian Maia realm. It's specialist in that as soon as I get a hold of you, you need to understand, no matter what position we're in, you're in danger. And it was really surprising to me how quickly Amanda Lemos opted to grapple, and that was often the choice was, well, I'm going to pull this guillotine, or I'm okay being in this grappling exchange. Because to me, stay the hell away. Just all you need to do is stay away, because on the feet, you win this 9 times out of 10.
So I would like to remove the Demian Maia name, because that is a very special, a very, very special name in my heart.
Okay. And is there someone you would like to replace it with?
Yeah, it's Jailton Almeida. And like, the reason why I put Jailton Almeida in there is because what I read from, or even Mackenzie Dern, frankly, but like the thing that I read, from Amanda Lemos, was after the first drive to the cage, which led to the guillotine and the things, it felt like Lemos realized that there was just no way she was going to be able to stop Jandiroba coming forward, because she hit Jandiroba with a couple of shots to begin with, and Jandiroba said, thanks, no stress, you've given me the underneath your elbows, I'm going to drive you to the cage and take you the fuck down now. And so it just felt to me as though Lemos realized, I'm not going to be able to keep her off me on the feet, and so we're going to have to do some grappling things. You didn't like the Jailton Almeida thing?
It's not that I didn't like it. I went Maia because I look at Jailton Almeida as power over technique. I look at him as, like, don't get me wrong, there's loads of technique, but he's a big, muscly, strong against these dudes that aren't necessarily,
I mean, they're 30 pounds heavier than him at the most part, right?
For sure. Don't get me wrong. hell of a grappler.
Yeah.
Damian Maia is,
Different gravy.
it's just special. It's just, we're here and you're screwed.
Yeah.
And it's against guys that know how to defend and know that it's coming, and you still can't do nothing about it because he learned how to wrestle really well. Like, he's still the blueprint for me of anybody that comes in with a jiu-jitsu base that you go, okay, great, go. This is the next thing you need to do. Learn to wrestle really well. And then work on the hands.
Yeah. Damian Maia, to me, the more that I re-study the fights, the more that he was unbelievably unappreciated for what he did
100%.
in the UFC. I think some of the people that he competed against, some of the ways in which he controlled fights is just unbelievable. Anyway, we will move on.
Yes.
We'll take ourselves. Otherwise, this is going to be a half an hour Damian Maia loving, right? And we don't have the time for those things. Our co-main event was Steve Garcia versus. You're gonna have to do it again for me.
Sungwoo Choi.
Sungwoo Choi. Thank you very much. I'll start here with this was a strange fight to me. It felt as though Steve Garcia, even more than usual, had it in his brain that Sungwoo Choi had taken money from him at some point in the last 2 weeks, and really sort of fought that way. I was impressed with Steve Garcia's stance switching. I was impressed with his ability to switch hit, similar to how Dustin Poirier did. The finish was vicious, right? Very, very vicious. But it just never really felt. It felt as though, right? And there is a thing for this, is that sometimes if you start a fight with aggressive body language, as well as like backing it up with the physical nature of the techniques that you're throwing, that can, I think, impose itself on fighters, right? There is something that happens as an exchange in the soul, right? The soul between, and obviously I can't really say that. I've got no evidence for that. But like when I watch the fight, the fight talks to me in a certain way, right? And it feels as though Sungwoo Choi was like, I'm going to go in and Steve Garcia is a good opponent and we're going to, scrap it out and it's going to be a good fight. And Steve Garcia went in like, you fucking stole my lunch money and I'm going to beat the absolute fucking shit out of you for it. And like, there's a difference there, right? There's a very tangible difference there. And for me anyway, it felt like Steve Garcia just had a chip on his shoulder and it showed. And Sungwoo Choi from almost, moment one wasn't able to get mentally into that same space.
Choi seems like a guy to me that he's either switched on or it's going to be a bad night. And we've seen in some of the switched on performances, most notably his last one previous to this against Jarno Aarons, dialed in and looked terrific. But in the moments when he's not, it's not good. And I don't want any of this to take away from Steve Garcia, who went out and did the damn thing and did what you have to do and has now done that in 4 consecutive fights, finishing people. But there's always just that little bit when I come away from these and I go, all right, so he needs to step up in competition now. And I don't know how that's going to go. And so kudos on a great performance. Kudos on going out and getting another stoppage win. 4 straight in the UFC is something I will never detract from. It is hard to do. Now I've always enjoyed watching Steve Garcia fight. They are killer be killed fights. There's no decisions in here. We're either knocking somebody out or getting sent to the shadow realm. So I'm always in. But I'm real curious to see what happens when he gets a little step up in competition, because he merits one now. And I don't know that it goes very well.
Do you have a name that you would like? Just out of interest, because I have one.
Okay, what's the name you have? And I will pull up some of my documents.
The name that I have is Sean Woodson.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably too tough of a test. Like that's the reality, right? Sean Woodson is probably too tough of a test because he's too smart to go in there and just play rock'em sock'em robots with Steve Garcia. He'll use all of that length and he'll just stand on the outside and snipe at you. which
Nate
is smart, but it's the right kind of person. Nate Landwehr would be fun. That would be two cats tied in a bag.
Yeah.
Billy Q certainly be a guy.
Sure.
Yusuf Zalal coming off a win over Billy Q back in the promotion. That would be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing a Jonathan Pierce. Someone like that. If we want to go easy timelines and Steve Garcia fights South Koreans, Doo-Ho Choi.
Yeah, I don't want to see that.
I mean, I'm not really all that on board with Doo-Ho Choi going forward. We'll get to that shortly, but I'd be okay with that. He's already fought Shailan Nurdenbecki and Josh Kulabau and sort of that group of guys. And so Woodson is probably a reasonable name, but I just think that one goes not great for him.
Yeah, I mean, if he wasn't fighting next week, I'd have said Nathaniel Wood, but that's a fight we can't make. Anyway, we'll move on to Kurt Holliber and Kanan. I'm going to butcher that fella's name as well. I'm not having a good night, Spencer. Jesus, Kainan Kruczewski. Fair play to him. My read on this was mostly that this is not a high quality fight, right? Like Kurt Holliber is a very difficult type of fighter to fight in that he's gritty, he's grimy, he's always in your face. He's a little bit like we talk about this a lot, where there is a they bring in a regen, right? And it feels to me as though Kurt Holliber is almost, he's not quite out the door yet, but he's a regen of Tim Means in that he's in your face and he is right there for the whole fight, and he's long and he's got a sick jab and he's gritty, and if it gets to those pocket exchanges in the clinches, he's dirty, and there's body shots and there's knees, and he can grapple everywhere, and he's tough, and he's not going to sub to anything, and he's going to put you on your back, and he's just exhausting, right? He's one of those rounds where if you are one of his training partners, maybe grappling or otherwise, you're just like, just for fuck's sake, just leave me alone for 5 minutes, and Kainan Kruczewski just wasn't quite able to reach the same level. Like, he was absolutely in the fight. He had his moments in the fight, some tight guillotines, some ninja chokes, these sorts of things. A DAS at one point, or an Anaconda, I forget. And they were all fantastic stuff. But he spent too much time on his back. It's too much time getting beat up by Kurt Holliber. Do you have any thoughts to add?
I mean, Kainan Kruczewski wanted this to be a technical fight. It feels similar a little bit to the Steve Garcia fight, right? Sung Woo Choi went in, let's have us a fight. This would be a fun competition. Nah, I'm going to kick your ass. And Kurt Holliber went in and was like, I know you want this to be technical and point fighty and range and length and all of that. I'm going to make it muddy. I'm going to make it real gross. And I'm just going to be in your grill, and it's not going to be pleasant. It's not particularly clean, but it's enough to really punish you and drown you and suffocate you and make you feel uncomfortable. And that's who he needs to be as a fighter. I think there are moments where he tries to be something he's not, and that's when it costs him. But we saw here, he just, figured out right away, me being grimy, me being gritty is going to be enough to get this guy beat.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I'm going to move on from that fight, mostly because both of those guys are roughly going to be where they are. One thing I will say is they are both absolutely gigantic humans for 155, and fair play to them. Fuck weight cutting. I'm going to stick with you, and I'm going to let you go a little bit on Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva, somebody that you're obviously very high on, somebody that you wish that we saw a little bit more of in the octagon. Tell me your thoughts both on, again, what this does divisionally for Bruno Silva, but also your thoughts on the fight, your thoughts on the comeback, these sorts of things.
So the comeback and the finish is exactly why I want to see this guy around more and why I was interested, right? He lost, I'm going to pull up the exact amount of time that fight went. That fight went 2 minutes and 58 seconds into the second round. So he lost about 7.5 minutes of that fight, I would say. There's probably 30 seconds in there where they're relatively even. But Cody Durden, to me, did better throughout the first and was in good spots throughout the second. But Bruno Silva just has that kind of power that shifts things, that sends your gum shield flying out of your mouth for all to see. And so a guy like that is now put together 4 straight victories, 4 straight stoppages, 4 straight performance of the night bonuses. I just want to see more of. I don't want this to be, and then he was gone for the next 12 months. I want to see him inside of 6 months. And he's going to be ranked. There's going to be opportunities for him, right? Cody Durden entered the fight at number 14. Should, at the very least, replace him at number 14. And so this division is still, I wouldn't say it's wide open, but there's room for guys like Bruno Silva, if they can be consistent in terms of appearances, to just move up relatively quickly. Like, you beating Cody Durden means you should fight somebody in the 7 through 14 range, which is where a Matthias Nicolau lives, which is where a Matt Schnell lives, a Tim Elliott. And with his power, with his crack, he can beat those guys. And then you're in the top 10. And then if you go out there and beat a Kai Kara France, or he called out Brandon Moreno, I think that's probably a bridge too far. But, you know, you're not far off from getting that fight. And so this is why I was excited going in. This is why I want to see more of him going forward.
Yeah, I think from a technical perspective, I thought the first 2.5 minutes was quite close. And then the 2.5 minutes of the first round. And then second 2.5 minutes, Cody Durden started to turn the pace up a little bit, started to turn the turn the tide a little bit. There was a wicked spinning back kick at the end of that first round. The right hand was money all the way through the first, but the second is where Silva really, really got hurt. Durden looks for an anaconda. The wrestling out was just gorgeous. I think actually I'm a little bit frustrated with Cody Durden's choice there. Like, he knows he's hurt his man. He knows he's hurt his man because he immediately dives on takedowns. And to then say, well, I'm going to anaconda you, or I failed, I'm going to anaconda you again, or I failed, and I'm going to switch to a guillotine and I failed, and then what? You know, now you know what's coming. He's rested a little. He's been choked and stuff. I get it. But his brain is resetting, right? His body is reacting. His brain is resetting. And then when he gets up, honestly, it felt like Silva was like, oh, he's hurt me. I'm going to have to fucking knock him out now. I'm just fucking knock him out, aren't I? And then he just goes over, takes his head off the center line, fakes a jab, cleans Durden's clock with an uppercut, and then, you know, the rest is history. Like, I think I completely agree with your assessment of what happens next. I certainly think, you know, Tagir Ulanbekov, Tim Elliott, these sorts of people, there is absolutely a finish there for Bruno Silva. Not to say it won't be fun for as long as it lasts. It definitely will be. But I certainly think there's a finish there for him. And then you go out and, you know, maybe not Brandon Moreno, but you're certainly looking at somebody in and around those sorts of positions. I was very impressed overall with Bruno Silva, and I echo your statements that he really, really needs to capitalize here. Because what will happen is if he does disappear for 12 months, he'll be dropping out the rankings. And 2, you're definitely not getting a fucking Brandon Moreno fight, right? We need to see him at least again before 2024 is out. And then let's see what 2025 brings. We will move on. Dooho Choi back against Bill Algeo. I thought Dooho Choi looked shit, to be honest. Bill Algeo basically just wrestle dominated him for about 7.5 minutes, and then some of the time Dooho Choi was doing some things. I saw loads of tweets come in at the end of the first round saying that Dooho Choi looked fantastic and this and that. I'm like, I'm not sure we've just watched the same round, because he's gotten elbowed a few times. He can't keep his feet on the ground and he's not doing anything. Now, don't get me wrong. When he made the read for that left hand, he found it 1 or 2 times before he landed big on Bill Algeo. But I think what's happened here, and maybe I'm wrong, I would like to be wrong, but maybe I'm wrong, is that we are looking at some historical favor in Dooho Choi because he had an amazing, unbelievable, once-in-a-lifetime fight against Cub Swanson. And so every fight after that, we are looking at with rose-tinted glasses. Whereas if we just take those off, he is an average 145 guy who has a name because of that fight, and he deserves to have a name because of that fight. But that doesn't take away from the skills on show. Thoughts?
100% agree. 100%. And Bill Algeo is the perfect guy for him to get a performance like this against and get back in the win column against. Because I think Billy's just at a point where it's, I want to have fun as well as, like, I don't think he's going in there. And this isn't to say that he's not going out there and trying to win. I think he's trying to win. But it's not, I'm going out there to win at all costs. It's not, I'm going out there and I'm just going to wrestle you to the ground and lay on you and keep you here and not try to have fun. He's going out there to have some fun and get into a fist fight. I talked to him before his fight previous to this, the Kyle Nelson fight. And he said, like, look, this isn't the thing that pays my bills. This isn't the thing that feeds my family. I have a gym. It does well. I've set myself up well. So this is side hustle. This is fun. This is what I get to do to enjoy myself. And that means he goes out and gets into fist fights, literally, figuratively. And sometimes that means the Korean guy that looks like he's still 18 years old, who throws hammers, hits you in the orbital and blows up your face. I don't think this is, I think you're 100% right about the rose tinted glasses. I think anybody that saw Do Ho Choi even before that Cub Swanson fight, and I was fortunate enough and happenstance enough to be in attendance for his debut, this dude that he is now at 33 is nowhere near who he was at 21, 22, 23 when he showed up and was just electric, fast, powerful, dominant. We look at him and want him to be the version that we remember him as, which even that memory is a flawed memory, right? And I say this with all due respect to the individuals he's beaten. His best win previous to Saturday was Thiago Tavares, who was a good but never great fighter. He's remembered for the Cub Swanson fight. It's an absolutely phenomenal fight. But he lost that fight, and lost that fight handily, I would say. We want him to be this, he's become venerated because of a fight that thoroughly entertained us. And that's fine. But when we're assessing him, we need to assess him correctly, as opposed to how we wish he would be.
I agree. We're going to round out the main card with Haider Amil versus Jung Young Lee. This was 65 seconds of just absolute fucking madness. I wrote about this fight in my Severe Spotlight. Effectively, my synopsis and my sort of dissection of this fight is that people want to see this type of fight. Whether we paint Alexander Volkanovski as this, you know, greatest fighter of all time, pound for pound great, this, that, the next thing, Islam Makhachev, whatever. They want to see this, right? Like when they're out with their friends or they brought their friends round and they've got the beers in and the pizza's round or whatever it is, they want to look at the TV and see this. They don't want to see fucking Miranda Maverick outscoring Diana Barbosa. They don't want to see fucking Kurt Holliber and Kainan Krachewski in a dirty boxing clinch situation. They want to see fucking Haider Amil and Jung Young Lee throw as many hooks as is literally possible in their shoulders and one fella fall over and the referee come in. Like, that's what they want to see. And then they're going to fucking clink their beers and drink more and go to the bar and order another round and have a great night, right? Like that's what the expectation is when we're talking about barn burners, these sorts of things. And for 65 seconds, we had a barn burner. You and I mentioned offline that we think that this specific strategy for both fighters is not going to keep them long in the tooth in the UFC. I mentioned in my spotlight a couple of names that have sort of opted for this more performant style over a winning style. Names like Terrence McKinney. Everyone was really high on Terrence McKinney when he first came to the UFC, and that sort of plateaued because of the choices that he makes in fights. Drew Dober has made a realization of himself that, you know, at the end of the day, the thing that gets you loved by the fans, if you can't be a champion, is being Drew Dober and going in and looking like Batman and Superman and Hercules all rolled into one human, and then, putting that chin on the line. The other is Andre Fiallo, who came in, fought 7 times in, 18 months or whatever, and now isn't in the UFC anymore, right? So like there is certainly elements to this that leaves us in a situation where we must understand what we're watching. But on the night, 65 seconds, big finish, Hyder Emil walks away 50 grand more heavy in dem pockets than he was previously. Thoughts?
I mean, you're spot on. It's one of those fights for me that I certainly enjoy it. Like, don't get me wrong. 2 guys want to stand in the center of the cage and just swing hammers at each other. Great. 38 punch combo to finish things out. Like, we're talking Tekken bonus points here. Like, kind of fun. But at the same time, there's that part of my soul that, as you're talking about this is the fight that people want, can't help but die and crumple a little, because you're exactly right. And that's unfortunate to me in the regard of all those technical, brilliant, tactical, masterful fighters that get overlooked because they're not out here standing and banging, or swanging and banging, as Derek Lewis would say. And so credit to him. And look, Hyder Emil is 34 years old. This is a man that doesn't have 6, 8, 10, 12 years to put together some wins and build some stuff and whatever. And so if his calculus going into this is, well, I'm going to go out here and smash fools as best I can and grab these bonus checks, more power to you. Good luck to you, sir. I enjoy your performances thus far. But if it's, I'm going to go out here and be champion, that approach ain't going to get you there. So we'll just see. Like, I'm same as some of these other ones already today, same as Steve Garcia. I look forward to seeing you compete next time out. I will be curious to see who it is that they match you up against, because I think there are individuals, and we'll see. I think there are individuals that will be a nightmare for you because they will not look to engage on your terms, and then we'll have to see how it goes.
We will indeed. We will look forward to the next 2 prelims. We're going to talk about Cody Gibson and Brian Kelleher, and we're going to talk about Miranda Maverick, Deonna Barbosa, and then I will leave you to just brush through those last 3. So Cody Gibson, Brian Kelleher, for me, great matchmaking, sort of exactly where both of those guys should be sitting. Cody Gibson, frankly, just longer, hits harder, better grappler, better wrestler. Brian Kelleher in a tough spot right now. Can't seem to sort of string things together in the way that maybe he, 1, would have wanted to, and 2, has done in previous stints, eras of his career. What shone specifically for you in this fight, and who do you think Cody Gibson is after this performance?
Cody Gibson fighting the way that he did, and he talked about it a little bit in his post-fight of like, he's working on figuring out how to fight at range, and still like he's still just trying to figure out how to be the long guy that he is, but use all of his weapons effectively. And some of those weapons are that grappling that we saw. I love the fact that at his age, which I believe is 34 now, 36 now, gave up his teaching gig and moved to Vegas and said, look, I gotta just be in the room with better people if I want to make any kind of run at this. And I don't mean that as like run at the title. It's just give myself the chance to have the best success possible at this career that I've got, even if we're being optimistic, 6 years left at, 7 years left at. This was his first win in a decade in the UFC. And so really excited to see that return. I think Boom Kelleher is a dude that, a lot of people in the media really like. He's a super personable dude, really fun guy. It's just, I think he's past his day. He dealt with a really bad injury. It hasn't been good since he's come back. he might be at that point where it's let's have a real serious conversation. And I never say that lightly. I never say those things easily, but it just hasn't looked good lately. It's bad decisions. It's continued steps back where he's continuing to lose quickly and get finished. And so it's time to have a conversation, I think.
Indeed. We said last week that Miranda Maverick needs to go out here and put on a statement. I'm just going to turn this around and say, did Miranda Maverick put on a statement for you?
Not to the level that I was hoping for, not to the dominance degree that I was hoping for. I thought it was a good fight. I think it was really good to see how well she listens and reacts to coaching in the midst of the fight. Her processing and her connection with Elliot Marshall is terrific. I think there are still, and some of that is a credit to Diani Barbosa that it wasn't as dominant. She is a good grappler. She did do some stuff well. She does tie you up and sort of neutralize what you're trying to do better than most. It's a good win. It keeps her moving forward. It's now 3 straight. It avoided the banana peel. And so as much as I wanted to see even better, I'm happy with what we got, and let's move forward and get her in there with sort of somebody in the line that she was originally in line to face this past weekend.
Fair enough. I haven't got any arguments with that, really. We then move on to those final 3 fights we talked about. Trey Ogden beats Loic Rajabov. Luana Carolina beats Lucy Podolova, and Thomas Peterson beats Mohammed Usman. Is there anything specific you would like to say about any of those 3 matchups?
They placed the heavyweight fight where it deserved to be placed. I'm glad that it wasn't, as we used to joke about on the preview shows, the UFC Apex heavyweight main card opener. That's it. Other than that, they're fights that happened.
Fair enough. Well, that is a balanced breakdown that has happened. Thank you so much to anyone that has managed to get this far. Thank you very much to my man to my left, technically my right, depending on where you are in the world, Mr. Spencer Kite. You can follow him at Spencer Kite on all of the platforms. You can catch all of his content across the entire internet, from Fighters Only to Sportsnet to the UFC.com and all of the other things, lots of X things and Twitter things and Instagram things and, the things. Anyway, thank you so much. Catch us later in the week for the preview show. Until then, peace.